Tonight, turning the blowtorch on Victoria, Labor's national executives takes over state branches. Also tonight, another black family in mourning calling for justice.
I can never get my husband back. I can never get my best friend. I can never tell my daughter, oh, he's coming to take you skating.
South Australia opens its borders, but not to Victoria. And the head of Cricket Australia walks over his fumbled response to the pandemic. Good evening, Tamara Oudyn with ABC News. The crisis engulfing Premier Daniel Andrews' government has deepened, with Marlene Carruthers the third minister to leave his cabinet in a little over 24 hours. Ms Carruthers, a close factional ally of the dumped Adam Somyurek, resigned after recordings surfaced of her discussing membership with him. And in an extraordinary move, the national executive of the party is set to appoint administrators to run the Victorian Labor Party, with local member votes to be suspended until 2023. Here's our state political reporter, Richard Willingham.
Investigators have already come calling for Adam Somyurek, knocking at his suburban home when he should have been at Parliament.
I wish to advise the House of changes to the government ministry.
He's sacking over an alleged branch stacking operation, and vile comments about his Labor colleagues cast a pall over the government.
It was deeply disturbing to me that the most violent and gendered language was reserved for me.
Labor MPs did throw their support behind Mr Somyurek's embattled factional ally, Marlene Carruthers, also under the pump for links to branch stacking.
Marlene's doing an outstanding job. It's a very hard slog for her.
Minister Carruthers is doing a very good and important job.
Less than an hour later, she resigned, saying she no longer wanted to be a distraction for the government. I look forward to the opportunity to clear my name, and I'm confident any investigative process will do so, she said. I note that these matters do not relate to any allegations of criminality or corruption. She's the second minister to resign. Robin Scott quit late yesterday.
They believe they've done nothing wrong. They've both resigned from the cabinet. I support that decision. It's the right decision to take.
The allegations about branch stacking are threatening to rip Victorian Labor and the state government apart. It's political dynamite for an opposition searching for a weapon.
Is the Premier seriously expecting Victorians to believe that despite a massive organised branch stacking system within his own government, corrupting minister after minister, that the first he knew about it was on Sunday night?
The answer to the question is yes.
Order. Couldn't lie straight in bed. Couldn't lie straight in bed.
Some MPs say the scandal is the result of factional infighting and a political hit job. But there are deep concerns from others about how recordings like this were made inside the office of Federal MP Anthony Byrne, a key member of the National Security Committee.
The notion that there is an unknown COVID recording is a great concern on our democracy and on our sovereignty, and that needs to be investigated no less by the Australian Federal Police and, if it's a national security risk, ASIO.
As for the matter of branch stacking, Premier Daniel Andrews has written to the Federal Labor Executive demanding administrators be put in place.
And then it will be for us here in Victoria to get on and make the reform that is very, very important.
And Richard Willingham joins me now from outside the Premier's office. So, Rich, what will this takeover of Victorian Labor look like?
Well, Tam, it's going to be quite an extraordinary takeover. Basically, the National Executive has been asked by the Premier and Anthony Albanese to take over Victorian Labor and by appointing administrators. Those administrators are former Federal Minister and Federal MP Jenny Macklin and former Premier Steve Bracks. Now, crucially, part of this, local voting by members in pre-selections in both state and federal seats in Victoria will be suspended until 2023. So selection for future MPs and new MPs will be done by a panel. There'll also be an audit of all membership to make sure that members are genuine, consenting and self-funding in a bid to try and smash the branch stackers model. And there'll also be, as they said, a restructure of the way the party operates. Now, this has been welcomed by Summers because they simply say enough is enough. Branch stacking stories aren't particularly new. There's been reviews before, but nothing has actually changed, and there is hope that this will be the case. Others warn this may concentrate power in a few people.
And Richard, how much damage is this doing to Daniel Andrews?
Well, losing 3 ministers in just over 24 hours is really, really significant, and it is probably the definition of a government in crisis. And it's also doing damage to the Premier and the government, because Victorians are dealing with, after they had a bushfire summer and then the pandemic, and now they're seeing a government literally focused on talking about themselves and seeing ministers allegedly doing things that basically on the taxpayer's dime to push themselves forward. The other questions are that MPs are quite nervous about what more could be coming. Some warn that this scandal has been triggered by a political hit job and there could be factional retaliation. The opposition also sent something and were quite keen in question time today to probe the Premier and Minister Martin Foley about whether they are confident that all staff, particularly staff members from left-wing ministers, are actually doing the right thing too. The Premier says he expects all staff to adhere by the rules, but plenty of nervous MPs about what could be coming ahead. Tam?
Richard Willingham, thank you. A teenage boy has been stabbed and killed outside a shopping centre in Melbourne's west. Our reporter Emilia Terzon is there. Emilia, what can you tell us?
Well, as you can see, there's a large crowd behind me here outside Brimbank Shopping Centre, where a 16-year-old boy was stabbed to death. Police say the teenage boy was here this afternoon when a group of around 10 males approached him. Now, the ABC understands he was stabbed outside a fast food restaurant just 50 metres from where I'm standing. He died at the scene, and the other group, they ran along this street before 6 of them were arrested by police. Now, as you can understand, it's been incredibly emotional scenes here tonight. We've seen people hugging each other, crying, and the ABC understands that the boy's family has been here at the scene this evening. And as I mentioned, 6 males in custody, and the homicide squad is investigating.
Emilia Terzon, thank you. Another school has been forced to shut, the third this week, because a student has tested positive to coronavirus. A grade 5 student at Strathmore Primary School in Melbourne's north is among 9 new coronavirus cases in Victoria. The child was tested after experiencing mild symptoms. The school is being cleaned, and the Department of Education is investigating whether more students or teachers at the school will have to self-isolate. Health authorities say school closures were always likely as restrictions eased.
It's not a concern per se. We knew there would still be cases as the community opened up. We knew that would occur. At this point in time, we haven't had any transmission within schools.
2 of the new cases have been linked to a patient at Monash Health, and 1 is linked to an extended family cluster in Coburg, which now includes 12 people. 3 of today's other positive cases are still under investigation. South Australian police officers are being investigated over a video showing one of them striking an Aboriginal man during an arrest. This footage was captured in Adelaide's northern suburbs last night and has been shared widely online. It appears to show the officer hitting the 28-year-old man repeatedly as he lies on the ground.
The video that was uploaded onto social media overnight obviously caused concern in terms of the police response. But in fairness to all people involved, a thorough investigation is being conducted.
We are calling for Premier Stephen Marshall, to come and own up to the fact that South Australia has an issue with police brutality.
The man was released from police custody this morning without charge, and the 2 officers involved have been put on desk duties. The family of Rayshard Brooks, the African-American man killed by police in Atlanta, has made a tearful plea for changes to the criminal justice system. They've remembered him as a loving father and asked people to protest peacefully in his name. The city's mayor has issued an executive order that requires police to show less force and de-escalate situations with suspects. North America correspondent Catherine Diss reports from Atlanta.
For the 3rd day, this community in mourning marched to demand those in power stamp out police brutality.
We stand today for the black people who never got a hashtag. Make some noise for all of them.
As the people of Atlanta called for change, the police department released the 9/11 call from a woman reporting that Rayshard Brooks had fallen asleep in his car at a fast food drive-through.
It's a white car. Is he black? He black? Ma'am?
Does he appear to have any weapons from where you can see him?
No, I think he's intoxicated.
The family of Rayshard Brooks still can't believe that routine call-out led to his death.
Not only did we lose another black, unarmed male, this time it landed on our front doorstep.
His widow, Tamika Miller, labelled his death murder.
I can never get my husband back. I can never get my best friend. I can never tell my daughter, oh, he's coming to take you skating or swimming lessons.
The people on the ground have little faith in authority. They've witnessed few changes since the civil rights movement led by Martin Luther King Jr. in the 60s and 70s. Atlanta's mayor is trying to regain their trust, moving swiftly to crack down on the use of lethal force.
It is clear that we do not have another day, another minute, another hour to waste.
After initially defining himself as the president of law and order, Donald Trump says he'll sign an executive order to overhaul how officers treat African Americans.
Thought it was a terrible situation. I studied it closely. I'm going to get some reports done today, very strong reports, and we'll have a little more to say about it tomorrow.
Y'all took the wrong person.
The devastated family of Rayshard Brooks says the only thing that will help them heal is for the officers involved in the killing to be convicted. Catherine Diss, ABC News, Atlanta, Georgia.
The US Supreme Court has delivered a watershed victory for LGBT rights, ruling that workers cannot be fired from their job because they're gay or transgender. In a 6-3 decision, the justices, including 2 Republican appointees, decided that LGBT workers should be protected by the federal law, which prohibits workplace discrimination based on sex. One plaintiff, Gerald Bostock, lost his job after joining a gay softball league.
I did nothing wrong, and I now have validation from the United States Supreme Court. But we share this victory together as a community, and I learned early on that this was more than just about my own personal circumstances, that it impacts so many people across this country.
The ruling will extend protections to millions of workers nationwide and stands as a sharp rebuke to the Trump administration, which argued the law did not extend to claims of gender identity and sexual orientation. Back home now, and police are investigating the death of a woman in a freeway truck crash in Melbourne's southeast this morning. The smash between 2 trucks and a car brought the Monash freeway at Endeavour Hills to a standstill during the morning peak. The 30-year-old driver of the car died at the scene. Traffic was diverted away from the road for hours to make way for major crash investigators. Still to come this hour, why visiting a GP could become more expensive.
There are days that some of our GPs actually have no booking for the whole afternoon.
The whole industry is under threat.
I cannot see any option for doctors' fees not to go up.
Plus, we speak to the man at the centre of a top-secret trial the government doesn't want you to know about.
Unease is growing in the world's biggest refugee camp as the number of coronavirus infections there continues to rise. Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh is the temporary home for almost 1 million Rohingya Muslims who've fled violence in neighbouring Myanmar. They're being urged to maintain good hygiene, but water and soap's in short supply and physical distancing virtually impossible. Southeast Asia correspondent Amy Bainbridge reports.
This is one of the most densely populated areas in the world. Up to 90,000 Rohingya Muslim refugees live in 1 square kilometre of land in Cox's Bazar on the southeast coast of Bangladesh. Some areas are in lockdown and there are curfews in place.
The COVID-19 pandemic is a crisis within a crisis.
29-year-old Sharif is among those taking refuge here from violence in his home country of Myanmar. COVID-19 poses a fresh threat to his family of 8 who live together in a cramped makeshift shelter.
We couldn't maintain social distancing in the camp because we live very close to each other, so it'll spread everywhere. That's why we're afraid.
Community leaders are training to help the effort to contain the spread, but the challenges are immense.
We are facing difficulties to hand wash because of a lack of water, and we don't have any masks to use.
The first isolation and treatment centre with 50 beds has been set up and is bracing for its first wave of patients.
Already this ward is fully equipped with the beds already prepared.
There are contactless washing stations and more water and soap are being transported in.
This is a very difficult situation in the camp. We're trying hard to supply water facilities to Rohingya refugees so they can wash their hands frequently.
As the cases grow, so too will the challenges for people who have already suffered so much. Amy Bainbridge, ABC News.
The number of coronavirus cases around the world has now reached over 8 million as infections surge in Latin America. But in Europe, normality is slowly returning. Borders have reopened across most of the continent, and in England, clothing and department stores opened their doors for the first time since lockdown. Europe correspondent Samantha Hawley reports from London.
It was like Boxing Day had come early. These keen shoppers ignored the social distancing rules to grab a bargain. England's famous high streets are coming back to life after sitting idle for 3 months. But what a different place it is, as most try and obey the 2-metre distancing rule, which the government's already looking to drop to 1 metre to improve sales.
25 minutes till it opens and there's probably about 50 people in the queue and it's only going to get bigger.
Yeah, it's nice to get out of the house to see everyone.
With the economy tanking by a record 20% in April alone, the government needs these shoppers to spend up big. In Europe too, there's some more relief. The famous Parisian bistro is back in business, inside and out.
It's like a renaissance, but with caution.
They come in every morning before work to have a little cafe and discussion, and yeah, of course, it's part of Paris especially.
And the EU is becoming one again, with border restrictions being widely lifted between member nations.
It remains a very fine balancing act between saving the economy and ensuring there's no second coronavirus peak. The daily death toll is starting to tell a positive story. For the first time since March, the daily numbers are below 100.
With the death toll nearing 42,000, a trip to the shops is small comfort for many Britons. Samantha Hawley, ABC News, London.
South Australia will relax its border restrictions to visitors from WA, Tasmania and the Northern Territory from midnight. But Victorians will have to wait. And it's not the travel bubble that's been mooted, with other states refusing to reciprocate for now. Stacey Lee reports.
It's the decision the tourism industry's been waiting for.
We've got so much to offer, especially in the world-class wineries, Kangaroo Island, just the charm of the Adelaide Hills, the history.
After 3 months of lockdown, visitors from some states are welcome back.
Effective as of midnight tonight, there will be no border in place with Western Australia, Northern Territory or Tasmania.
That means travellers will no longer need to isolate themselves for 2 weeks on arrival.
So they're released from that obligation effective as of midnight tonight.
There is a catch. The journey has to be direct.
Also, somebody can't travel from Western Australia into Sydney and then into South Australia.
Which might be tough for Tasmanians. There are no direct flights.
I think a lot of people down here are really happy for the borders to be closed until the rest of Australia is completely free.
I think I'd like to go and taste some Barossa wine.
But there's a catch with that too. No other states are yet following South Australia's lead, which means visitors still face the prospect of 2 weeks isolation when they return home. The WA Premier thinks opening borders to just a few states is a legal risk.
The advice we have is that is unconstitutional. This is all about protecting West Australians from the virus coming in.
Those in the ACT and Queensland may also be allowed in soon, but other states with higher numbers of cases will need to wait until July 20.
But we are still concerned about New South Wales and Victoria.
While the announcement is welcome news for the South Australian tourism industry, some tour operators are concerned at the lack of notice. With many restaurants and hotels still closed, they're worried they won't be able to get back up and running quick enough.
From a tourism perspective, it does take a bit of time to build things up, to reopen. So the more notice we've got, the better it is. So if we've got a head start, that's got to be good.
Hospitality venues will be able to accept more people from Friday. Stacey Lee, ABC News, Adelaide.
As property prices fall and interest rates hover at record lows, many mortgage holders are taking advantage of their bargaining power with banks that are keen to secure their business. While the rate of new mortgages has fallen to a 5-year low, the number of people refinancing their existing loans is growing rapidly. Rachel Papazzoni reports.
Swarath is one of the lucky ones. She's just wiped off thousands of dollars a year on her mortgage repayments for the 2 apartments she owns. The rates on her home loans were cut by about 1.5%.
Which is a massive drop. So definitely the rate was a big motivation for me to shift over and go through the whole process.
Swar also pocketed a $4,000 rebate from her lender as banks offer sweeteners. The value of new home loans fell almost 5% in April, the sharpest monthly decline in 5 years. But for existing borrowers, almost $8 billion worth of home loans were refinanced in April, double the amount for the same time a year ago.
But the problem is, even if you're getting a better rate on your home loan, the value of your property could be falling, with economists predicting we'll see price declines of between 5 and 10% this year.
Let's call it straight now. The market is falling as we speak. There is no question about it.
Mortgage brokers like Michael Letts are now spending most of their time refinancing loans for existing customers.
What we're seeing is a 70% in refinance applications versus 30% purchase.
Which means more homeowners are likely to end up like Swar.
I think I've had it really, really good, very lucky, and I wish other people were in a similar position.
A lucky starting point to enter the first recession in a generation. Rachel Papazzoni, ABC News.
The local share market produced its best gain for 2 months as it surged back from 3 days of heavy falls. And the Australian dollar jumped as well. Here's Alan Kohler.
The All Ordinaries Index surged nearly 4% today, preserving the image of a market that doesn't quite know what it's doing, but at least it's not mucking about as it does it. Today's gains were led by banks and financials, but there were quite a few tech and biotech stocks that were very well bid indeed, like Paradigm Biopharmaceuticals, which is working on a treatment for knee arthritis, Live Tiles, which sells workplace software, and Catapult, which makes the things that go between athletes and footballers' shoulder blades to track what they're doing. Here's a chart of 10 days of the All Ordinaries so you can get some perspective. Today's rise at the opening was as big as last Tuesday's, but the difference is it kept going and closed above 6,000 points. And it wasn't just the Australian market that caught some buying today. Stocks in Tokyo and Seoul went up around 5% each, even though the rise in New York was less than 1%. The minutes of the last Reserve Bank board meeting came out today, and it was a bit of a gloomy effort. I picked out this quote. The extent of job losses pointed to the possibility of a more persistent reduction in overall demand than expected. And today the Bureau of Statistics put out its weekly jobs data based on the payroll software that the tax office uses ahead of Thursday's official labour force numbers. The weekly index rose 0.4%, continuing the gradual uptrend that started in mid-April. It's definitely not a V-shaped recovery, more like a L leading back. The commodity trading was dominated by a huge rise in the oil price overnight, and the Australian dollar has jumped back above 69 US cents. And that's finance.
The coronavirus pandemic has claimed another scalp at the top of Australian sport, with the resignation today of Cricket Australia's Chief Executive Kevin Roberts. His departure comes after he fell out of favour with Australia's cricketers, state associations and staff members. Here's National Sport reporter David Mark.
When the end came, it was swift.
Kevin feels and the board agrees now's the right time for new leadership at Cricket Australia, and we reset the organisation to prepare to bounce back from COVID-19.
Roberts was the man appointed to lead Cricket Australia out of arguably its darkest hour, the ball tampering scandal.
I can promise you that we'll be genuine in our quest to build respect and to build trust.
But that promise ultimately fell flat when Cricket Australia, with Roberts at the fore, moved to slash costs in April.
at the time was necessary in that current climate to reduce costs quickly.
The organisation stood down 200 staff. It cut funding to states, which has already resulted in around 150 job losses, including in grassroots development. And it infuriated the players, who said they had a lack of confidence in the organisation's financial forecasts.
He panicked because they were, like everyone else, scared about the impact of the pandemic.
The question of whether Roberts jumped or was pushed was cryptically answered by Cricket Australia's chair today.
Ultimately, the board takes all responsibility. As me as chair, I'm the one ultimately responsible for the organisation, hence why we've made these changes today.
I think it's got to the point with the loss of confidence and maybe trust as well in Kevin Roberts' performance, where they had to move on.
Roberts will be replaced in the interim by Englishman Nick Hockley, fresh from successfully staging the Women's T20 World Cup. Insiders are talking about the game's crisis of confidence, and that could yet get worse tomorrow, with Cricket Australia set to announce a round of redundancies. But with the full summer schedule, including 4 tests against India, now more likely to go ahead, the financial situation is looking rosier than it was 3 months ago. David Mark, ABC News.
The AFL Tribunal has upheld West Coast Eagle Jeremy McGovern's one-match ban for striking the Gold Coast's Alex Sexton. The tribunal was held online due to COVID-19 restrictions. McGovern argued that he was just trying to grab Sexton's jumper. The jury disagreed. The defender will be unavailable for West Coast's round 3 clash with the Brisbane Lions on Saturday night. The FFA has announced the A-League season will resume on the 16th of July, despite not yet having a broadcast deal. Melbourne Victory will play Western United in the first match, but the full schedule's yet to be released. Clubs are returning to training this week. A-League boss Greg O'Rourke says negotiations with current rights holders Foxtel and the ABC are ongoing.
There has been a good dialogue going through there, working through not only the return to play but the future broadcast. So we're hoping that those matters get brought to a head in the next couple of weeks.
The A-League has 27 matches to complete, and O'Rourke says border restrictions will ultimately determine where the matches get played. Time for the weather now. Here's James Hancock.
Tam, our cloudy skies put on quite a show. This was Traralgon's stunning sunrise, and it was a moody scene at Western Port. We had a mild winter's day. It only dropped to 13 in town this morning, rising to 17 degrees at noon, and later hitting our top of 17.9. Here's what it was like elsewhere in the state. Minimums were up to 6 degrees above the monthly average. Daytime temperatures were also a few degrees higher than average. Gippsland looked like the place to be, with 20s through the region. Most districts got some rain in the 24 hours to 9 this morning, 39 millimetres for Falls Creek, but East Gippsland and the Northern Mallee missed out. Those passing showers today brought 0.4 of a millimetre for the city at last check, but only hitting 13 at Mount Dandenong. Right now in town, we're sitting on 14 degrees in Melbourne and 16 at Mildura. Ballarat is on 9 and Sale 14 degrees. Interstate, it was dry in Sydney and Brisbane. Showers and a possible storm are on the way for Perth. Now you can see the band of clouds ahead of the approaching cold front in the west. The same front is expected to reach Western Victoria on Friday. In the meantime, a cold front will clip southern Victoria tonight. Then tomorrow, a high will move over the state. It'll bring a spell of fine weather before that change. Well, around the country tomorrow, up to 15 millimetres of rain could reach Perth, and a cold start there for Canberra. There's a chance of early showers through the state's east tomorrow. A partly cloudy day is on the way for the west after a foggy start. It could get down to 3 at Ballarat, and similar conditions on the other side of the state, but cloudy skies for East Gippsland. On the bays, winds will be south to southwesterly, 10 to 15 knots, becoming variable about 10 knots early in the morning. And there's a strong wind warning for the East Gippsland coast. So cloudy in Melbourne this evening. There's a high chance of showers. Tomorrow's looking partly cloudy with light winds. It'll be cooler than today, 8 and a top of 14 degrees. Dry again on Thursday, mostly sunny up to 16. Friday brings a chance of rain in the late evening, partly cloudy and 17. For Saturday, rain. There's a chance of a thunderstorm too. Sunday's back to showers and 14. For Monday, a shower or two and 13 degrees. Tam.
Thanks so much, James. And that's it for this evening's bulletin. Stay with us now for 7:30 with Lee Sales.